Hey everyone. You know, Tesla stock, it's always been a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, ups and downs.
But this week, buckle up. We're talking a 15% drop in a single day.
Whoa. Even for Tesla, that's a big one.
It is. So we're digging deep today, trying to get past those headlines and understand what's really going on. We found a financial podcast episode that had some really interesting insights, so we're going to share some of those with you guys.
I'm excited to dive in. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is. Sales are down in China and Germany.
Big markets for them too.
Huge markets. And then you've got Elon Musk. Well, stirring the pot, shall we say, with his political views, and some people aren't happy about it.
And then of course there's the question of Tesla's valuation. I mean, is the stock price actually reflecting what the company's doing right now? Some investors aren't so sure.
Right. Lots to unpack. But the first thing that jumped out at us from this podcast was just how much trouble Tesla is having with sales right now.
Yeah, that was pretty alarming.
Their shipments from that Shanghai plant dropped almost 49% in February.
Ouch.
And then in Germany, registrations are down, get this, 70% in the first part of the year.
Wow. So China, that's the biggest EV market in the world right now.
Right.
So to see a slowdown there is a big deal. And that drop in Germany, that kind of suggests that you might be hitting a ceiling in Europe.
Yeah, it's not good.
Analysts are starting to, take notice. They're slashing those sales forecasts. I saw one that dropped their forecast by like 16%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's pretty significant.
Yikes. Well, fewer sales, of course, means less revenue.
Yeah.
And that makes investors nervous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody likes to see those numbers go down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the sales, right? There's this whole thing with Elon Musk and his his views, his political statements.
Mm-hmm.
They're causing quite a stir.
Yeah, especially in Europe, it seems. He's very vocal about his politics, and it's rubbing some people the wrong way, especially over there.
And the podcast we listened to, they made a really good point.
Hmm.
Public perception.
Yeah.
It matters big time, especially these days.
Yeah. So are we seeing Elon Musk's, I don't know, his personality, are we seeing that actually hurt Tesla's brand?
That's what the podcast argued.
Yeah.
They said this negative perception could have real consequences for Tesla in the long run. Think about it. You're thinking about buying a Tesla. You maybe strongly disagree with some of the things that he's saying.
Yeah.
Does that make you hesitate? Does that make you think twice? Maybe look at a different car company.
I mean, it would make me think, yeah.
It's definitely something potential buyers might be considering.
Right. And then there's this whole other issue that the podcast dove into, and this is where it gets, I think, even more interesting. There's this gap between how much Tesla's stock is worth, like that price, and how the company is actually performing.
Yeah. The reality versus the dream.
Right. For years, everyone's been excited about Tesla, and the stock price has been going up and up because of these promises, Self-driving cars, robots.
The future.
The future. But the truth is, they're still making most of their money from selling EVs.
Which aren't doing so hot right now.
Exactly. So now investors are kind of waking up and being like, wait a minute, are we getting ahead of ourselves here? That high stock price. Is it actually justified?
Right. The market's been valuing Tesla based on what they could be, not necessarily what they are right now. And now, that present reality, it's starting to bite. That's why we're seeing this drop.
It's like we're seeing the future and the present colliding a little bit, right?
Exactly.
And to add to all of that, the whole market is getting jittery.
Right. Things are not very calm right now.
Not calm at all.
We've got tariffs. We've got this possibility of a recession looming. Nobody really knows what's going to happen next.
And that kind of fear, it hits the tech sector particularly hard, right?
Oh, absolutely. And Tesla, they're a big tech player, right?
Yeah.
So they're getting caught in all of this.
Yeah, caught in the downdraft. So it's like we have this perfect storm brewing, internal issues at Tesla, these external pressures from the market, and just this feeling of uncertainty everywhere.
A lot of unknowns.
A lot of unknowns. And then, if that wasn't enough, we have this major Tesla shareholder, Ross Gerber. The podcast mentioned him. He's predicting the stock could drop another 50%.
Oh, wow. Now that's a bold prediction.
Right. It's like a punch in the gut if you own any Tesla stock.
It is a strong statement.
Yeah.
But, it does reflect what some analysts are thinking. Maybe Tesla's overpromising and underdelivering. Are their goals actually realistic?
Yeah, are they just a little too ambitious?
Maybe. It's a wake-up call for anyone who just bought into the hype without really looking at what's actually happening.
Okay, so we've laid out a lot of challenges here. Sales are down, Musk's stirring the pot, and that big question mark hangs over their stock price. Is it all built on a shaky foundation?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is. So what does all this mean for Tesla's future? I mean, can they get out of this nosedive? Are they headed for a crash landing? What did this podcast We Found have to say about that?
Well, they were cautious, but I think they made a really important point. Tesla is at a turning point.
A turning point, okay.
They're at a turning point. If they want to get that investor confidence back and stay on top of the EV world, they've got to face these challenges head on. They can't just ignore them anymore.
Right, they can't just kick that can down the road. So where do they start? What can they actually do? Did the podcast give any advice?
They did. And the first thing they said, get back to basics.
Yeah.
Get those EVs selling.
Back to basics, guy.
Focus on that core business, those sales numbers. They need attention. They have to produce more cars. They have to get those deliveries up, especially in those key markets, China and Europe.
Okay, so ramp up production, make sure they can actually meet demand. But it's not just about making more cars, right? What about those big promises about the future, that self-driving, robot-filled world?
Exactly. Investors are starting to get, a little impatient. They want to see more than just visions. They want to see real results.
Less talk, more action.
Yeah.
So what kind of results are we talking about, did the podcast say?
They said Tesla needs to focus on real, tangible advancements. Things like self-driving technology,
Yep.
battery production, things that will actually show that they're moving toward their goals, not just talking about them.
Show, don't tell.
Right. It's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, but also prove that they can deliver in the here and now.
It's tough, right? Especially with the economy being shaky, with all this competition popping up.
Yeah. A lot of pressure.
Speaking of pressure, you know those quarterly results that are coming up?
Oh, yeah. Everybody's going to be watching those.
I bet. Those are going to be big.
They will. They'll give us a much clearer picture of how Tesla's actually doing financially.
Right. Are they actually making any progress on all these problems?
Exactly. A strong quarter,
Yeah.
that could really boost confidence. But on the other hand,
A weak quarter. And it could be a disaster for the stock.
exactly.
High stakes. And then you've got those big unknowns, like what's going to happen with U.S. trade policies, what's going to happen with the economy as a whole.
Yeah.
Tesla can't control that, but it's going to have a huge impact.
Right. That's the thing about the market. It's so unpredictable. The podcast, they really emphasize that Tesla's future, it's not guaranteed. There are so many moving parts. And these next few months, they're going to be crucial. Are they going to weather the storm? Or are things going to get worse?
Okay, so we've got these internal problems, we've got the external pressures, we've got a lot of uncertainty. If you had to pick one big takeaway for everyone listening, what would it be?
I think the big takeaway is this. Even a company like Tesla, they're innovative, they're popular, but they're not immune to the market, to what investors are thinking.
Right.
Success is not a given. There's a real chance they could stumble. They could even fall if they don't adapt, if they don't execute perfectly.
It's kind of humbling, right? I mean, they've been so dominant in the EV space.
Yeah.
But it's a good reminder, even the biggest disruptors, they have to keep evolving to stay ahead. So what should everyone be watching for in the coming weeks and months? What are those key indicators?
Definitely those quarterly results.
Oh.
Those are going to be a major signal of which direction Tesla is headed. But even beyond that, watch how they're responding to all these challenges.
Right. Are they actually taking action to fix those sales numbers?
Exactly.
Are they making progress on self-driving technology?
Are they changing their strategy?
Right. How are they adapting to all these market conditions? Big questions.
Huge questions. And of course, keep an eye on Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
What he says and does, it really matters.
Big ripple effect.
Huge ripple effect. It could either make things worse or calm things down. It's a really fluid situation.
Tesla, they're walking a tightrope right now. The next few months could be make or break for them.
Yeah, the stakes are definitely high.
High stakes. This is their biggest test yet, right? How they handle it will determine if they succeed or fail long term. But before we move on, there's one more thing from the podcast I think is important to mention. They talked a little bit about the competition in the EV market.
Yeah.
It's not just Tesla anymore. The old school car companies, they're finally getting serious about EVs. And then you've got all these new EV startups popping up all over the place.
It's getting crowded.
It's a whole new ballgame. We'll dig into that more in part 2 of this deep dive.
See you there. It is getting crowded out there.
It is. So the big question is, does Tesla's, I don't know, does their stumble, does that mean the whole EV market is headed for trouble?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder, right? They've been the leader for so long.
Right, like the EV poster child. If they're having problems, does that mean the whole industry is in trouble?
It's a natural question. But the podcast made a really important distinction. Tesla's facing these very specific problems that don't necessarily mean bad news for every other company making electric cars.
Okay, so it's more nuanced than that. Give us that bigger picture then. What did they say about the overall health of the EV market?
Well, first of all, they said that globally, EV adoption is still going up. Governments are offering incentives, battery technology is getting better, cheaper. More and more people are interested in electric vehicles.
Yeah.
That momentum, it's not going away just because Tesla's hit a bump in the road.
So even if Tesla isn't selling as many cars, the demand for EVs is still there,
Exactly.
which kind of brings us back to that competition. Tesla used to be the only game in town.
Right.
But now, like you said, you've got the traditional car companies making their own EVs. You've got all these startups.
It's not that the EV market is shrinking. It's that there's more people trying to get a piece of it.
So the pie is just being divided up into smaller and smaller slices.
Yeah, Tesla's having to fight harder now. And honestly, some of their problems might actually help their rivals.
That's interesting. So who benefits from Tesla losing ground? Did the podcast have any thoughts on which companies are in a good position to take advantage?
They didn't name specific companies, but they did point to some interesting trends. Like, for example, those big established car makers, Volkswagen, Toyota, those guys, they have a lot of experience. They know how to manufacture cars.
Right. They have that infrastructure.
They have global reach.
Yeah.
And now they're finally getting serious about EVs. They might actually be in a better position to capitalize on Tesla's weaknesses.
So maybe it's the old dogs learning new tricks that will come out ahead in this new phase of the EV race.
It's definitely something to watch.
Yes.
But they also talked about those startups, the ones that are really focused on one specific thing, like luxury or performance.
Okay, niche markets.
Yeah, like maybe boutique EVs. They could find their own little space in the market, too.
So it's not like a winner-take-all situation anymore.
Nope.
There's room for different players with different strengths, and honestly, that's a good thing for people who want to buy EVs.
Definitely. More choices.
More choices.
More variety.
More innovation. It's a win for everyone. Yeah, it's a win for consumers. It's amazing how much things have changed. It wasn't that long ago that Tesla was basically the only electric car you'd ever see.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's a totally different game.
A totally different landscape.
Super exciting and a little unpredictable, too. So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for electric vehicles?
Well, the podcast ended on a pretty optimistic note, but with a word of caution. They still think the EV market is going to grow a lot over the long term, but it might be a little bumpier than people thought.
Not just a smooth ride to electric car utopia.
Probably not.
Yeah.
There are going to be some ups and downs along the way. Some companies are going to succeed, some are going to fail. There are going to be surprises.
Yeah, always surprises. It's going to be fun to watch it all unfold.
Hey, well.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into Tesla and the future of electric vehicles.
We've covered a lot.
We have. We talked about slumping sales.
Controversial CEOs.
That question of whether Tesla's stock price is actually realistic. And of course, the rise of all that new competition.
A lot of moving pieces.
A lot of moving pieces. But hopefully we've given you a good understanding of what's really happening.
More than just those headlines.
Exactly. But as always, we encourage you to keep learning, do your own research,
Keep digging.
dig deeper into these companies, follow those trends, come to your own conclusions.
The more you know, the better.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this part, here's something to think about. As the EV market keeps changing, what role do you think Tesla will play? Will they be able to be number one again?
Or will they just become another car company in a really crowded field?
It's a good question. Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be interesting to watch.
It will. Join us next time for part 3 of this deep dive.
All right, so we're back. And I think the question on everyone's mind is, does Tesla's, their troubles, does that mean the entire EV market is going to crash?
It's a fair question. When the biggest name in EVs starts to struggle, you can't help but wonder what it means for everyone else.
Right, Tesla's been the leader for so long, it's hard to imagine them not being on top. But the podcasts we've been talking about, they made a really good point. Tesla's facing some very specific issues, things that don't necessarily apply to the whole industry.
Exactly. It's not a one-to-one thing. Just because Tesla's having a rough time doesn't mean electric vehicles are doomed.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little more. What did the podcast have to say about the overall health of the EV market?
Well, they were pretty clear on this. Globally, EV adoption is still on the rise.
So people are still buying electric cars.
Oh, yeah. Governments are pushing for it. Battery technology is getting better and cheaper all the time. More and more people are interested in going electric. That momentum, it's not going away just because Tesla's hit a bump.
Okay, so the demand is still there, even if Tesla isn't capturing as much of it as they used to. Which brings us back to that competition we were talking about earlier. Like you said, Tesla's not the only game in town anymore.
Right. It's not that the EV market is shrinking. It's that there are more players now, more companies trying to get a slice of the pie.
So the pie is being divided up, and Tesla's slice is getting smaller.
Exactly. They're having to fight harder for their market share. And, some of Tesla's struggles, they might actually benefit some of those other companies.
Interesting. So if Tesla is losing ground, who's gaining? Did the podcast give any hints about which companies are in a good position to take advantage?
They didn't name specific companies, but they did talk about some of the trends we're seeing, like those traditional automakers, the ones that have been making cars for decades. They're starting to get really serious about EVs.
Like Ford, GM, Toyota, those guys.
Yeah, they've got experience, they've got those massive factories, they've got a global presence. They might actually be in a better position to capitalize on Tesla's weaknesses.
So maybe experience and scale, maybe that's going to be the winning formula in this next phase of the EV race. It's
Yeah.
like the old dogs, but they've learned some new tricks.
Right. But then there are those startups too. The podcast talked about how some of them, the ones that are really focused on specific niches, they could do well too, like high-end luxury EVs or super high-performance electric cars.
So it's not just one winner takes all anymore. There's room for different kinds of companies with different approaches.
I think so, yeah.
And honestly, that's a good thing for anyone who wants to buy an EV. More choices, more variety, more innovation.
It's a win for consumers.
Absolutely. It's amazing how quickly things change, right? Just a few years ago, Tesla was basically the only electric car company most people could name. Now it's a whole new ballgame.
It really is.
So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for electric vehicles?
Well, the podcast ended on a kind of cautiously optimistic note. They think the EV market is still going to grow a lot over the long term, but they also think the road might be a little bumpier than people thought.
Not just a straight shot to everyone driving electric cars.
Probably not. There are going to be ups and downs. Some companies are going to succeed, some are going to fail. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Tesla and the future of EVs. We've covered a lot. Sales struggles, Elon Musk's controversies, that question of whether their stock price is really justified, and of course, the rise of all that new competition. But hopefully we've given you a better understanding of what's happening.
More than just those headlines.
Exactly. So, as always, we encourage you to keep digging, do your own research. What do you think about all this? What role do you think Tesla will play in this evolving EV market? Let us know your thoughts, and until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.